Alright, so for number 1, the ones that were direct were these 3. If you chose any of the other ones, you started missing points. Questions on why those are direct / the other ones are not? Okay. Remember that you can also graph those and see, do they make lines that go through 0, 0? For number 2, you had to find the direct relation equation. So find your k value first. Divide these two. Then, after you figured out what k was, put it back into your equation. So the 3 points, did you solve for k or show your work to solve for k? Did you get the correct k value? Did you put it back in correctly? Questions on that? 3. 1, keep the variables the same. You can say that that's like your y, that's like your x, but still use a and b. So your original equation would be a equals kb. You needed to write your original equation using your original variables. Then find your k value. So -7 over -3, which would have simplified to just 7 over 3. Many of you changed that to a decimal. It's a repeating decimal, so don't do that. Leave it as a fraction. So then in your equation, you have a equals 7 over 3b. You are looking for b when a is 14. Some of you switch those. So you would need to do one of the following. Either divide both sides by 7/3, doesn't look nice, or take 7/3 and flip it and multiply it on both sides. So I'll write both. Either or, not both. Some of you were multiplying but not flipping. Some of you were dividing and flipping. One or the other, not both. But your answer should have been, I think it was smooth. I need to double check that. Yes, it was. So that was 1 for setting up the original equation, 1 for the work to find k, your simplified answer to find k. That one was 5 points. Okay. The work to find your b and then your b answer. Questions on that one? Or they gave you variables, so use those. You can still say your g is like your y, your m is like your x, but you need to use the original. Set up your original equation, g equals km. Then use the numbers given to find k. 200 miles was your x, the 9 gallons was your y, or your g and m. So this would have been 9 over 200. Whether you left it as a fraction or put it as the decimal 0.045 was fine. Some of you put 0.45, which threw it off. Then you needed to use your k to find how many gallons. So put in 315, multiply those together, and you got 14.1 something. 175. Right, so you could have put 14.2, 14.18, or just 14.175. Some of you were copying each other and just put 14.75 or 14.15. Neither of those was right. Okay, so the points on this one were, did you set up your original equation, get the correct k value, work to solve for g, and the correct g with the label. Just putting 14 point whatever g is not a label, because I don't know what that means. Questions on that? And then the last one. Skipping this first part. We know the interest and the number in her bank account are going to be important. The interest is your y. The amount in her the amount deposited is x. So if you use, whether you use these variables or different variables, still set up your original equation. Find your k value. So that would be 6150 over 1500. This one you couldn't leave like this because you had a decimal and a fraction. So that should have been 0.041. Some of you were just putting 0.41, which threw things off. Then use that to find whatever you're missing. We're looking for our y again. We're given x. So you would multiply those two numbers together to get 82. So the 6 points in this were, did you label which variables were which one's x, which one's y, or whatever variables you use? Did you set up your original equation? Did you solve for k and simplify it, get the decimal answer? Did you do the work to find y, and then the correct answer for y with the label? Questions on that one? On the next page, we're going to talk about one of these, but there were only two that were inverse. It was these two. Some of you put this because the x was in the denominator, so I accepted that because of something I had said. But because it has this plus 2, it actually would not be. So if you put that, I accepted it. If you didn't put that, then that was fine anyway. Remember that you can also put these in your calculator, graph them, see if they make that hyperbola shape. But they have to have that around 0. So they can't have a b. Okay. For number 7, you had to find the inverse variation equation. So find your k value, multiply these together, and then whatever your k value was, put it back into your equation. So again, 3 points, solving for k, correct k, and then putting it back in. For 8, because these were x and y, you didn't need to set up the original equation. You did need to find k. So multiplying 13 and 1/7 together, this gave you a repeating set of decimals, so leave it as a fraction, 13 over 7. Then we were trying to find the value of x when y is 9.1. So if you replace y with 9.1, and you multiply both sides by x. Some of you were trying to multiply by this, but that wouldn't get x out of the denominator. Then you could divide both sides by 9.1. I don't know if it was this class or another class. Some of you were doing it not in the y equals k over x, but in the k equals yx. that doesn't matter, as long as you do one of them. You just have to show all your work for that. Do this one here. So if I did 13 over 7 and divided it by 9.1, we get 0.204. Okay, so whether you put all those decimals, 0.2, 0.204, 0.2041, whatever. Questions on that one? For 9, this was similar to 7. It gives you the 0.24, that's your x and your y. Multiply those together to find k. And then you're looking for the inverse variation equation, so y equals 8 over x. For 10, they gave you variables v and p, so your original equation would be v equals k over p. Use the numbers given to find k, 27 and 13. If you need to, your v is like your y, your p is like your x. So 27 pounds, the pressure would be your p or x. And this would be your v or y. So multiply those together. So 13 and 27. And 351 should have been your k value. Some of you in this problem got a number really big instead of 27. I don't know where that number came from. After you get this number, you can put that back in. And we were looking for the volume when the pressure was 9. So you would be dividing by 9 to get 39. The label here would be cubic feet. Some of you were putting V equals 39 volume. That's not really the label. Questions on that one? Then the last one, you needed to define your own variables first. So number of revolutions would be your y or whatever variable you use. And radius would be x. So your equation would be y equals k over x. Then the numbers they give us, the 12-inch is your x, the 100 is your y. Multiply those to find your k. After you find your k, put it back in. And we're looking for number of revolutions, y, when given x. So if we divided that, we'd get 80. So points for these last two were the same as on direct. Setting up the equation, solving for k, getting k, solving for whatever variable, getting the original answer, and your variables, and then everything except the variables for that one. Questions on that? Then on the last page, (12 through 15) were, could you set up the equation correctly? So 12 was y equals kmn. All of these equations needed a k. Very jointly, you're putting them next to each other. 13, a varies inversely as b, so a equals k over b. And directly as c, you can either put it next to it or in the numerator. That one was worth 2 points. Did you do the inversely part right and the directly part right? W varies inversely as the square root of v. W equals k over the square root of v. And then 15, m varies jointly, so m equals k and o, and then inversely as p, divide by p. So again, that was worth 2 points. Did you do the jointly part right and the inversely? Questions on those 4 before we move on? The questions afterwards, you can basically use the questions before to set them up. Almost all of them had one that was similar or the same. So C very jointly as A and T is very much like 12. So that would be C equals KAT. Put in all the values to find K. So 20 equals K times 1 times 5. Or 20 equals 5K. So K should have been 4 when you solved it. Then after you solved it, put it back in. We know C is 16, K is 4, A is 2, and we're looking for T. So we have 16 equals 8T, divide both sides by 8, and T should have been 2. So the points on that were, did you get the equation right? Solve for K, correct K, solve for T, correct T. Questions on that one? (17) A varies inversely as B and directly as C will be set up just like 13. So A equals K over B times C. Or if you want to put KC in your numerator, that's also fine. So the numbers given, we have 1/2 equals K times 2, or the 2 times on the outside, and 56. Then, depending on how you wrote this, you could have either simplified 2 and 56 or got rid of the 2. What did it say? 28. So let's say I simplified this first. This would be 1 over 28. I could either multiply both sides by 28 or cross multiply, does not matter. So K should have been 14. Then you would put that in with everything else and solve for B. And I'm running out of space. So A is 14, K is 14, C is 1, we don't know what B is. So if we multiply both sides by B, get it out of the denominator, and then divide both sides by 14, b is 1. So some of you weren't getting this because of the way you solved it, or weren't using inversely, or you put c in the denominator, which threw everything off. So try not to do that on the test. Questions on 17? B varies inversely as the square of v, not the square root. So similar to this, but not square root. So b equals k over v squared, should have been how you set that up. Then put in your numbers to find k. 2 equals k over 5 squared. You know that's 25. And then you can multiply 2 and 25. So those of you that got this far and got 50 were correct. It was just everything afterwards. Okay. Now we need to find v when v is 4. So 4 equals 50 over v squared. Get v squared out of the denominator, multiply it on both sides. I'll write this on here. So 4v squared equals 50. Divide both sides by 4. So 12.5. And then to get v by itself, get the square root of both sides. So 3.53. I'll do this stuff here. 3.54, 3.5356. At least one decimal. How many you put after that is up to you. Okay. So the ones that were 5 points were the same. Set up the equation, solve for k, get the correct k value, solve for the variable, answer. But the one that was 6 was 1 extra point because you had to make sure the setup was correct. Questions on that one before we do this last one? Okay. For the last one, the cost C varies jointly. So K times our width and our length. What do you call that? W and L, X and Y and Z, does not matter. Then if a debt costs $1,200 when the width is 12 and the length is 20, use those numbers, find K. So 240, divide both sides. I think that was 5. Then take that and the numbers you're given. So now we're looking for the cost. We know the width is 10 feet and the length was also 10 feet. So your cost should have been $500. Questions on that last one? Anything you need me to go back to, re-explain, re-go over? Yes, Addison.
For number 1, how would you do the graphing to figure this out?
For which one?
Y equals X over 2.
Okay. So in your y equals, figure out whatever's there. If it's a fraction, do your alpha y equals to get your fraction. Put in x over 2. Graph it. And then you would see that this is a line. It goes to the origin. If you were counting your slope, it is the same. Other questions? So I'm going to say this now, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't still try to do as much as you can today. So Wednesday is our flex day. So if you don't finish, you can either come tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, or wait till flex day. That doesn't mean you're going to do 5 problems and turn it in and say you're finished. You're going to keep working until you feel like you can't anymore. So at like the 10-minute left mark, then when you still have a bunch left, then I'll collect tests. Make sure you show your work